In the dim light of dawn, James Halden sat alone in his modest kitchen, the aroma of stale coffee permeating the air. The walls, adorned with fading photographs and military memorabilia, bore silent witness to a past that felt increasingly distant. His gaze lingered on a particular photograph, a younger version of himself, standing tall in uniform beside a robust horse with a gleaming chestnut coat. Titan. The name resonated deeply within him, evoking memories of camaraderie and survival. The rhythmic ticking of the clock was interrupted by a sharp rap at the door. James's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting visitors. Rising slowly, he approached the door, the weight of anticipation pressing heavily on his chest. Upon opening it, he was met with the stern visage of a man in a crisp suit, holding an envelope. "Mr. Halden?" the man inquired, his tone devoid of warmth. "Yes," James replied cautiously. The man extended the envelope. "You've been served." James accepted the document, his fingers trembling slightly. The man turned on his heel and departed without another word. Closing the door, James moved to the table, unfolding the letter with deliberate care. As his eyes scanned the contents, a cold dread settled over him. The letter was a formal notice from Mason Ridge, a wealthy entrepreneur known for his extensive collection of prized horses. Ridge claimed legal ownership of Titan, citing a recent acquisition from the military surplus auction. The letter demanded that James relinquish the horse immediately or face legal consequences. A surge of emotions coursed through James: disbelief, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Titan wasn't merely a horse. He was a lifeline, a steadfast companion who had seen James through the darkest chapters of his life. The thought of parting ways was unbearable. Determined not to surrender without a fight, James reached for his phone and dialed the familiar number of Delilah Moore, his counselor at the Veterans Affairs office. Delilah had been a pillar of support since his return from deployment, guiding him through the labyrinth of civilian life. "Delilah, it's James," he began, his voice tinged with urgency. "James, what's wrong?" Delilah's concern was immediate. He relayed the contents of the letter, his words tumbling out in a rush. There was a pause on the other end before Delilah spoke. "This is serious, James, but we have options. The bond between a service member and their animal is profound. There are legal precedents that recognize this. We can contest this in court." James exhaled, a glimmer of hope piercing through the gloom. "Do you think we stand a chance?" "With the right approach and evidence of your bond with Titan, absolutely," Delilah affirmed. Over the ensuing days, James and Delilah collaborated tirelessly. They gathered testimonials from fellow soldiers who had witnessed the inseparable bond between man and horse. Medical records highlighted the therapeutic role Titan played in James's battle with PTSD. Each piece of evidence painted a vivid picture of a connection that transcended mere ownership. The day of the hearing arrived, casting a somber mood over James. Dressed in his formal attire, he led Titan into the courthouse grounds. The horse's ears flicked nervously, sensing the gravity of the situation. Onlookers whispered among themselves, some snapping photos, others merely staring. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mason Ridge sat confidently, his legal team flanking him. James took his place beside Delilah, his hands clenched into fists. The judge, an older woman with piercing eyes, surveyed the room before speaking. "We're here to determine the rightful ownership of the horse known as Titan. Mr. Ridge, you may present your case." Ridge's attorney rose, presenting documents that detailed the purchase of Titan through legitimate channels. The argument was straightforward. Ridge had acquired the horse legally and was entitled to possession. Delilah stood, her demeanor calm yet resolute. "Your Honor, while the legality of Mr. Ridge's purchase isn't in question, we contend that Titan isn't merely property. He is a therapeutic companion integral to Mr. Halden's well-being. The bond they share is one of mutual survival and healing." She proceeded to introduce the gathered evidence, testimonials, medical records, and photographs capturing moments of undeniable connection between James and Titan. Each piece added weight to their argument, painting a narrative of intertwined fates. The judge listened intently, occasionally glancing at Titan, who stood quietly, his large eyes reflecting a depth of understanding. After both sides concluded their presentations, the judge leaned forward, her expression contemplative. This is indeed a unique case. While ownership laws are clear, the emotional and therapeutic bond presented here cannot be ignored. Turning her gaze to James, she continued, "Mr. Halden, if given the opportunity, what would you say to Titan?" James swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. Rising slowly, he approached Titan, the courtroom fading into the background. Placing a hand on the horse's neck, he whispered, "We've been through hell and back, buddy. I can't imagine my days without you. You're more than a horse, you're family." A hushed silence enveloped the room, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. The judge exhaled softly. "In light of the evidence and the profound bond demonstrated, I rule in favor of Mr. Halden. Titan shall remain in his care." Relief flooded James, his knees nearly buckling. Delilah placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, her smile radiant. Mason Ridge's face darkened, but he remained silent, recognizing the futility of further protest. As James led Titan out of the courthouse, the sun breaking through the clouds seemed to mirror the lifting of his own burdens. Reporters approached, eager for statements, but James ignored them, his focus solely on the companion beside him. Delilah caught up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You did it, James." "We did it," he corrected, gratitude evident in his tone. Pausing, he turned to Titan, pressing his forehead against the horse's. "Let's go home, partner." Together, they walked away from the courthouse, each step a testament to resilience, healing, and an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. The courthouse steps echoed with the slow, deliberate crunch of riders' boots. Each stride carried the weight of uncertainty and restrained emotion. As he walked beside his attorney, Maria Tran, he scanned the entrance with the haunted gaze of someone who'd spent years looking for something only to find it slipping through his fingers at the last moment. His military jacket looked out of place among the navy suits and collared shirts flooding through the glass doors, but Ryder didn't seem to care. His mind was fixed on one thought, Ace. The horse hadn't left his thoughts for a single moment since the rescue team pried the reins from his trembling hands that day in the desert. And now, here they were, 2 years later, meeting again, but not on the dusty battlefield. In court. A courtroom was no place for a soldier's final goodbye, but it was all the state would allow. Inside, the cold sterility of the courtroom made Ryder's skin itch. Oak benches, pale walls, an American flag limply draped in the corner. He'd seen courts before, military tribunals, briefings, but this was different. This was personal. Maria whispered to him, explaining the judge's background, the state's stance, the loopholes they might push. Ryder listened, but his focus kept drifting toward the back door. That was where Ace would come through, led by an officer from the Department of Agriculture, a living piece of his past, being paraded like evidence. The judge called order. The hearing had begun. The prosecution opened predictably. The state contests the claim that the animal, Sergeant Ace, belongs to Mr. Ryder Kingsley. Military property, even when retired, is not subject to personal retention without authorized transfer. The rest blurred. Ryder's attention snapped into sharp focus only when a pair of heavy doors creaked open behind him. There he was. Ace stepped into the courtroom with a cautious gait, his coat duller now, his frame thinner, but unmistakably proud. His ears flicked forward, then flattened as he scanned the unfamiliar room. His handler kept a firm hand on the reins, guiding him toward the front of the room, but Ace's eyes locked onto Ryder. For a moment, nothing moved. Not Ryder, not the judge, not the flickering fluorescent light overhead. Time just paused, and then Ace turned away. Not in fear, not in recognition, just disinterest, indifference. The room, which had just begun to murmur, went silent again. Ryder's chest tightened. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, his horse galloping toward him, eyes shining, the bond unbroken. But that didn't happen. Instead, Ace stood still and stoic, like a statue carved from the same apathy Ryder had once used to protect himself. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Kingsley, do you still wish to proceed?" Maria placed a gentle hand on his forearm. You don't have to. This isn't the moment that defines you. But Ryder stood. Yes, Your Honor. I do. Permission was granted for a brief statement. Ryder took slow steps toward Ace, stopping just a few feet away. He didn't reach for the horse. Instead, he spoke in a low voice, one trained to stay calm under fire. We were both broken when we met. Ace had been reassigned 3 times. He kicked down fences, threw off riders, ignored every command. They said he was done. I was barely out of rehab, 2 weeks off painkillers, and I didn't trust anyone, least of all myself. But we were paired together. No choice. He paused. Ace shifted his weight, but didn't look at him. They gave me a box of gear and said, "This one doesn't follow orders. Don't get killed." The courtroom chuckled softly, but Ryder's voice grew deeper. We didn't trust each other. For months. But something shifted during our first mission. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. Just a moment in the middle of silence, when I dropped the reins and he didn't run. He waited. Ryder's eyes welled but didn't spill. In a place where you don't know who'll be shooting at you, the only real comfort is knowing your partner won't flinch. Ace never did. Not once. Ace finally turned his head, almost imperceptibly, his right ear angling toward Ryder's voice. The tension in Ryder's shoulders softened, just slightly. He pulled me out of a live-fire zone when I was bleeding out, navigated a minefield when I couldn't walk, slept beside me through desert nights colder than any winter back home. I trusted him more than I trusted any man I ever served with. Ryder's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the pain of longing. They told me I couldn't keep him because of protocol, that he was government property, that he was being reassigned to a mounted border unit. I begged for one last ride. They said no. He swallowed hard. I know you don't remember me, Ace. I can't blame you for that. Maybe they broke something in you too. But I just needed you to know I never stopped trying. And if I can't keep you, then let me give you something real before they assign you a number again. The judge stared over his glasses. Is that your official plea, Mr. Kingsley? Yes, sir. Not just to keep him, but to keep a promise. To both of us. The judge sighed, shuffling some papers. This isn't a standard case, and emotions don't dictate policy. But, before he could finish, something happened. Ace took one step forward, then another. The handler tried to hold him, but Ace nudged past with surprising force. Ryder didn't move. He just watched as Ace came nose to nose with him and pressed his forehead against Ryder's chest. A soft exhale left the horse's nostrils, warm and familiar. Ryder closed his eyes, hands still at his sides. He didn't dare reach for him, not yet. The judge's voice was gentler now. It seems the horse remembers more than he let on. The courtroom filled with hushed murmurs. A camera shutter clicked. Maria blinked in disbelief, covering her mouth. Even the bailiff smiled. I will need time to consider the legal aspects, the judge continued. But in light of the testimony and this moment, the court will allow Sergeant Ace to remain temporarily in Mr. Kingsley's custody, pending full review. Ryder let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He gave Ace the softest touch on the cheek, finally letting his fingers rest where they had once fit so easily. The handler reluctantly stepped back. He came alive when he heard your voice, you know, he whispered. We've been trying for weeks to get him to respond. But today, something changed. Ryder didn't respond, but something in his expression softened. A crack in the stone, letting light in. Outside the courtroom, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread. The veteran and his horse. The reunion no one expected. Reporters circled, asking questions Ryder didn't answer. He was too busy walking Ace down the steps, guiding him gently like a memory he didn't want to wake from. Later that evening, in a borrowed paddock behind a local animal shelter, Ryder sat on the ground with his knees up, watching Ace graze. The horse wasn't tethered, wasn't confined, just free for once. The court's decision wasn't final, and Ryder knew that. But this moment, this small miracle was his. He reached into his coat and pulled out something worn and frayed, patch. Their unit emblem. He laid it gently in the grass near Ace's feet. Whatever happens next, he murmured. I got this moment. I got you back, even just for now. Ace lifted his head, gazing at Ryder, and then slowly, stepped forward and rested his chin on the soldier's shoulder. Neither of them moved. The silence between them spoke volumes, a history neither the court nor protocol could erase. And though the outcome was still uncertain, one thing was clear: something had shifted, something profound. And the world, for just a moment, bore witness. Absolutely. Here's the final 1,500-word section of the story titled Asterisk. The ex-soldier wanted to bid farewell to his horse in court, but what happened shocked everyone. Asterisk. Continuing seamlessly from the previous acts. The courtroom had never seen such stillness. Even the judge, usually stern and unreadable, leaned forward as Jack took a step toward the center of the chamber, his boots echoing against the polished floor. Charlie stood nearby, his head high, mane slightly tousled from the brisk ride to the courthouse. His presence alone defied every assumption. This wasn't just a horse. He was history. He was loyalty in living form. The opposing attorney rose quickly, objecting to the presence of the horse. Your Honor, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. Animals are not permitted in this court. But Judge Holbrook lifted a hand, silencing him. Her eyes hadn't left Jack. We'll allow it, she said calmly. Let's hear what the veteran has to say. Jack turned, his eyes moving across the room filled with quiet onlookers, some holding their breath. He placed a gentle hand on Charlie's withers, grounding himself in that familiar warmth, the same way he had in the worst of times, beneath gunfire, under moonless skies in desert valleys. When I came back, Jack began, voice rough but steady. There were two things the Army let me keep: a pair of boots and a list of memories that don't let me sleep more than 3 hours a night. But this horse, Charlie, he wasn't on that list. A hush settled deeper over the courtroom. They said he was government property. Jack continued. But no one held Charlie when bullets flew. No one braved the flash of bombs with me, except him. We didn't just serve together, we survived together. He paused, glancing down at Charlie who, as if sensing his cue, nickered softly and pressed his nose into Jack's side. They tried to auction him off like scrap metal, Jack said, and his voice cracked, the pain not fully concealed anymore. I asked just to say goodbye one last time, but even that was denied. The attorney for the state stood again, clearly flustered. Your Honor, while we respect Sergeant Reed's service, the horse was bred, trained, and maintained by military resources. Ownership. I'm not asking for a medal, Jack interrupted, his tone sharper now. I'm asking for recognition that some bonds don't end with orders. The judge leaned back, her expression unreadable once more. Then slowly she rose. Sergeant Reed, she said, do you have any proof that this horse shares a bond with you stronger than the average working mount? Jack hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. I can prove it. He turned to Charlie, unhooked the lead, and stepped back. Charlie, he said softly, stand. Charlie didn't move. Jack raised 2 fingers, made a slow circle in the air, and whistled once, an old field signal they'd used during recon missions. Charlie immediately stepped forward, lowered his head, and knelt, his front legs folded gracefully. A collective gasp passed through the courtroom. That's not standard training, Jack said quietly. That's years of trust. That's a horse who's seen fire and still follows my voice. The judge looked over at the clerk, nodded once, then turned to the opposing counsel. Unless you have something stronger than regulation codes and training manuals, I think we've seen enough. The opposing lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. Sergeant Reed, Judge Holbrook said, this court rules in your favor. The horse is yours. A moment of silence. Then the room erupted, not in cheers, but in spontaneous, restrained applause. Even the clerk clapped once, discreetly. Jack's knees buckled slightly, but he caught himself. Charlie rose beside him, and the two stood there, side by side, like comrades reunited after war. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Sunlight broke through the clouds in golden streaks, warming the courthouse steps as Jack and Charlie emerged. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras clicked furiously, but Jack ignored them all. He bent to whisper something to Charlie, and the horse whinnied in return, nudging Jack's shoulder like a brother come home. But something deeper lingered in Jack's gaze. This victory, while sweet, didn't erase the scars. It didn't bring back the men they'd lost or the nights he still woke screaming. The war had taken much, but today he'd reclaimed one piece of his soul. "Where to now?" someone asked as Jack mounted Charlie right there in front of the courthouse steps. Jack turned to the crowd, his silhouette striking against the sky. "Home," he said. "Wherever Charlie is, that's where I'm headed." A cheer broke out this time. People didn't just see a man and his horse. They saw a story that defied bureaucracy, that celebrated loyalty over law, and healing over regulation. They rode out slow, not hurried, down the long avenue lined with maple trees, just turning with early autumn gold. Every clop of Charlie's hooves on the pavement was a beat in the rhythm of redemption. Weeks passed. News outlets dubbed the moment * the day a horse defied the system. * Jack didn't care for fame. He turned down interviews, ignored endorsements, and declined talk show appearances. He had a barn to repair and land to tend. But mostly, he had Charlie. And Charlie had him. Every morning, Jack woke to find Charlie at the fence line, waiting. And every evening, Charlie followed Jack across the field as he checked the fences, just like he had on patrol in the Valley of Dust and Fire, oceans away. One afternoon, a battered pickup pulled up the long dirt driveway. A woman stepped out, olive jacket, gray streak in her braid, steady eyes. Captain Maya Torres. Jack hadn't seen her since Kandahar. "Heard you started a sanctuary," she said, glancing around the peaceful spread of fields and forest. "I've got 3 more like Charlie. Saved them from a retirement facility." Jack nodded, throat tight. Room for all of them. And just like that, a new chapter began. Not just for Charlie, but for others too. The ranch grew. Veterans came, not just for the horses, but for themselves. They found something in the silence between heartbeats and hoofbeats. Something they didn't know they were missing. Jack rarely talked about the court case. He didn't need to. The barn wall held one photo. Charlie kneeling in that courtroom. Jack beside him, eyes brimming with quiet determination. It was enough. But sometimes, on moonlit nights, Jack would sit outside by the fence. Charlie would rest his head over Jack's shoulder, and they'd just breathe and sync. In those still moments, Jack felt it. Not just peace, but purpose. A reason to believe in something again. They say soldiers don't cry. But the truth is they do, just not always with tears. Sometimes, they cry in the way they care for what others discard. In the way they fight for silent companions who've carried their burdens without complaint. In the way they whisper thank you. Not just for survival, but for the chance to feel whole again. Charlie was more than a horse. He was the bridge between war and peace, between a man and his own fractured heart. And in saving Charlie, Jack had unknowingly saved himself. Their story didn't end in court. It began there,